With reports surfacing of an incident regarding a substitute teacher slapping a child in the face, Jersey City Public School teacher Lisa Fantacone, who teaches the student, detailed the full allegation and called on the board to end its contract with Source4Teachers, the firm that the hiring of substitutes was outsourced to.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Fantacone, and I'm a special education teacher at PS number 34, as well as the JCBOE Senior Building Director, as well as the classroom teacher of the student who was slapped in the face by the Source4Teachers substitute earlier this month. I want to give a little background on this event. I'm the employee of a company. The Board of Education renewed their contract again for another $4 million. While telling the teachers and support staff there is not enough money to pay our raises and settle our contracts. I'm a third grade inclusion teacher. On October 1st, 2014, my co-teacher was absent. I was in school this day. At 2:35 p.m., I was called into a meeting with my principal, assistant principal, and another teacher. At this time, a Source4Teachers substitute was left alone with my students. I will repeat, at 2:35 p.m., which means this substitute only had to watch my students alone for 10 minutes and couldn't handle it. 5 minutes into the meeting, my principal gets called. When she returns, she says to me, "Miss Fantacone, you are not going to believe this, but your classroom is alleging that the substitute just struck one of your students in the face." As this was the end of the day and during dismissal, by the time administration was able to respond, the substitute had just opened the door and let my third grade children run off alone instead of following the dismissal procedure. How did we find out about the incident? One of my students ran across the hall to another third grade teacher for help. Luckily, all the third grade teachers banded together to help my students, alert administration, and help the children find their parents after school. The police were called to the school. The student who was struck was interviewed with his mother and aunt present. Two of my students who were also still in the building attending Casper were interviewed and had the same story. Diapers came the next day. All the students had the same exact story. The little boy ran for his book bag, fell. The substitute then picked him up by his shirt and slapped him across the face in front of my whole classroom of 8- and 9-year-old third graders. When the police spoke to the head of Source4Teachers, she refused to get the man's name and became irate and screaming and threatening the police officers. This is the company we're doing business with? The next day, my students expressed their fears to both myself and my co-teacher. They did not, and still do not, feel comfortable or safe having a substitute ever again. If I am called to a meeting, they cry and beg me not to leave them. I asked my administration to have a counselor come and speak to my students, but that has not happened. I will not allow this incident to be swept under the rug. There you go. All right. I am coming here tonight to ask what the board is going to do for my students who are still traumatized by this incident. I want somebody from the board to come look my young 8- and 9-year-old students in their eyes, hear their fears, and tell them that they'll be safe and protected. Source4Teachers needs to be fired immediately. But I promise I will not let this incident be ignored. Stop wasting money on companies that care more about business than children. Do you now see who will be left to teach classes if you lost a wonderful, dedicated, and knowledgeable staff? Stop spending money inappropriately. Fire Source4Teachers and give all of us the fair contract we have earned and deserved.
Superintendent Dr. Marcia Lyles responded to the allegation and explained what the district is doing to deal with similar situations.
Let me just say that in terms of Source4Teachers, it is unacceptable for any teacher to in any way put any child at harm. And I only wish that the Source4Teacher it's been alleged that was the only teacher where we've had that allegation. However, we are in a good position with Source4Teachers because in this instance, this person is no longer working with us even during the investigation. So there is nothing in terms of accountability from my end because it is now on to the authorities. This person will not work in our district. However, as I said, this is a continuing problem around allegations against teachers, and there are several strategies that we have to look at. In one instance, we need to make sure that we provide support to all of our staff and our students and to understand how to diffuse situations. But when someone has an allegation against them, there is an investigation that goes on, and it is an independent investigation. So even the teachers or the teachers' aides or anybody who has had an allegation, we do not make a determination until the investigation is completed.
Finally, board member Ellen Simon questioned the sincerity of the union regarding the issue by highlighting the arrest of an art teacher for sexual assault.
There were a lot of comments about allegations of a student being slapped. I was very interested to hear this from the crowd because on June 17th, a teacher was arrested, charged, and cuffed for sexually assaulting a student in school. We had a meeting 2 days later, and no one mentioned it. The union came, I think we had 600 union members there, and no one mentioned it. So I'm glad that people really care about students and student safety. I'd like to see that concern expressed across the board. Thank you.
Sure. I'm Michael Shuren with Hudson County View, the eye of the community.